Okay. Good morning and welcome to Crosstalk. It is a little bit later than our usual start time, and we apologize for that. But most of you watch on a delay, so when you turn this on, it won't matter. But I'm David Walford, and I'm here with Joe DeLoach and Brian Beveridge, and we are here to talk about all sorts of things church. So we talk a lot about Eatonton and Eatonton First Methodist and church in Eatonton across denominations, and just everything going on in 2021. And there's a lot going on, as we all know, but we're glad to sit here and talk with you. Today we wanted to talk, we've gone down some of the lists of things that are going on, and we may talk a little bit about last week. The three of us went to Nashville, Tennessee to the New Room Conference, which is the 9th year it's been done, 8th time. Last year I think they did it online, but no one was in person because of the SARS-2 COVID-19 pandemic. So we were there for number 8, and it was good. There was about 1,500 Methodists that were there, and we spent 2.5 days there and drove all the way to Nashville and back. So
The camera's cut off again.
are we on? Are we still live?
The camera went off. We got audio.
So as we work on getting the camera on, we're going to talk a little bit about a topic that we've been talking about young people and the church. And so young people in the church continue to riddle us. Turns out that we learned at the conference that we're not alone. There's a lot of issues in the church about attracting young people to the Church of Jesus Christ. And so so we want to make sure that we address it today. We definitely want to keep thinking about it. All three of us have a real passion for young people, and today's topic that we're going to focus on is the idea that people, or specifically young people, feel like they aren't allowed to question anything. So, we're back on. Great. So I'm going to just open the top conversation, and if you're watching live, we definitely want you to consider commenting or giving us your input. The idea that young people, or people in general, feel like they aren't allowed to question anything. I'm an older person, and sometimes I don't feel like I am allowed to question things. What do you guys think about that?
Well, a lot of times it's the fact that, you know, the young people in the churches, they feel like they're not able to challenge anything or question it because it's been done this way for 100 and some years.
So what do they question, I guess, is the question I have. What questions do they have?
Like, what relevance is this to me? Why should I do this? What's the benefits? And a lot of it is based on today's generation. They want to see evidence. Faith is very hard to explain, and it's very hard to get them to see it. They want to see it in their hands. They like to question, well, especially if you go into the Bible, the miracles in the Bible.
Yeah.
How do you think that really happened? Do you really believe that?
Right.
Did God really flood the whole earth? And, so with that, a lot of the questions come from, well, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
Why should I be good if, and those type of things.
Young people, when I think of young people, I guess I think of people who are, say, 18 or older. And I don't know, I'm 44 as of Sunday. I don't really know if I had any idea which side my left foot was on and which side my right foot was on for probably the first 10 years of adulthood. From 18 to 28, it really took me, honestly, till I was about 26 before I could actually figure out how the world was working and spinning around. And a lot of folks that were 18 had joined the Army. A lot of folks had gone on to do research at institutions. But me, I was just trying to pass my classes and kind of keep myself out of jail. And so questioning things, I didn't know what to question. So young people don't necessarily even know what to question, let alone what questions to ask.
And see, I think this ties right into the topic we talked about, moral failure of church leaders. they look at a lot of the problems in the church and think, what is all this about? You know, like, for example, I had a person tell me, well, these churches today can't decide what to do with their own denomination. How are they going to help me to figure out me? So those type of questions.
Well, to add to that, another question that I always had going into like churches was, what am I allowed to do? You know, they always say, we need you to volunteer, we need you to do this, we need you to do this, we need to do this. But then when you actually volunteer, there's this wall that's put up that's like, well, we don't want you to do this, 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 or this. We don't mind if you clean the bathrooms. But then they tell you to go out and make disciples of the world. Well, how are you going to make disciples of the world if you're not allowed to do anything?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is true, but my sense is that there's an arrested development in our society, from broken homes, from video games, from cell phones. There's a lack of development across the board, probably from people that were age 50 and under. And I know there's a TV show called Arrested Development, and some people joke about it. But in fact, I've heard military men my age that were in the military and are out say that, you know, your adolescence is crushed in boot camp. Just as an example. As an example, they almost across the board you'll hear men, usually it's men, like on television, when asked about boot camp or military, they say we crush adolescence. And I don't know if that's good or bad. But at some point, you know, think about the Native Americans. A lot of tribes would have, when their children would come of age, you know, say 13, they would go on vision quests, and it was part of like dropping them out into the wilderness and making them figure out what to do. And then there's like the Amish. Some Amish have a Rumspringa. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but you know, this idea that like these kids are going to leave the farm, you know, leave this sort of, I don't want to say cult, but this sort of group of people that act a certain way, and let them decide if they want to come back, and let them understand the world, and then come back and live in the world that they've been that they have created. But that said, I don't really know. I think I have a hard time knowing what questions they are able to answer.
A lot of the questions is, if God is real, why is He allowing this to? Why is He allowing bad things to happen to me? For example, death, financial, divorce. I've done everything right. You know, it really shakes their faith. The big is why, and what am I? What role do I have to play? What is my purpose? You know, and they want a direct text from God.
The culture has sort of fostered these kids. Let's just assume they have a mom and a dad. Maybe they're divorced, maybe they're single, but they've grown up in this sort of world that has sort of fostered them into safety. They've had car seats at every stage until they were like 9 years of age or 10. They've been sort of strapped in, if you will, into a safety bubble. Okay. And then at some point in their teenage years, everything sort of goes haywire. And in the midst of that, they have these little things called cell phones. And I think there's what I'm trying to get at is, I think there's a little bit of a gap of understanding from me at 44 to someone who's 24, because they grew up in a different world than I grew up. So when I hear like young people today feel like they aren't allowed to answer or to ask questions, for me it's, I didn't ask a lot of questions because like the world was coming at me a little bit differently than the 24-year-old. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like I didn't have car seats. We didn't even use seat belts until I was in the 5th grade. My mom said it's time to start using your seat belt.
That's one of the ones you were in the back of a station wagon. I hope you didn't smack the glass.
Right. We didn't worry about what we ate. We just ate candy bars if we were lucky, and we were happy to just not go in. I got spankings and worse, switchings.
Oh yeah.
And my fear of the Lord really seeds itself out of the fear of my dad, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I don't question things the same way that some do.
And see, a lot of young people think the church doesn't want you to question anything. They push it down. They don't want to question. They don't think they're allowed to say, explain this, tell me why you feel this way. Right. I don't understand this. And a lot of adults have trouble answering their questions.
Well, and honestly, I just was quoting a certain person that I went to a meeting to listen to yesterday, and that person was quoting percentages and facts, quote unquote facts.
Yeah.
And then someone asked them, "Can you give us the source of your facts?" And that person couldn't source. And so, like, what is it? What is truth?
And you look at young people, say, when I say young people, of course, long past that stage, I think of teenagers. But of course, we really need to go from, like I would say, almost 13 to 40. In that time span, they're bombarded with TV, media, how much of it is true,
Yeah.
you know, and they look around, and in our society, let's face it, Christianity is not real popular.
Sure.
It's not upheld like it used to be when I was coming
Right.
up, and it's now the other side of the coin is what everything is about. So why should I give up what I want to do on Sunday morning to go to church? Because I'll be honest with you, it's all about
Or Saturday night. Too.
it's all about me. Me,
That's
me,
what
me.
it comes back to the cell phone.
I want to feel good. I want to be entertained.
Right.
I don't want to think. I don't want to deal with that. Why can't I have this? I need this. It's I, me.
And it sounds like we're complaining, but there is a maturity or a sort of a somehow we've got to help the next generation that we aren't necessarily. I say we that I mean I'm 44. I hang out with people who are in their 20s every morning when I go to the gym, and there seems to be no disconnect between us in that moment, but they process things much differently, I think, than I do.
You also have a
Based on-
common goal. When you're at the gym, you have a common purpose for
Right.
being there.
Right.
That's a good point.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
when at church, when they first come in, if they've never heard the word of God, they don't have the same common purpose and mission that we have.
And they probably didn't. There's a lot of gaps now because parents didn't necessarily sort of throw their kids in the back seat. Like I got tossed in the back seat, and not everybody in my generation did. But look, you're going to NYF. You're going to church with me. Put your coat on. You know, I mean, this was the
Well, see,
no
mine,
questions.
That's right.
Mine was
Speaking of
breathing.
questions, no questions asked.
mine was a lot more laxed. It was, we'll go to church every once in a while. And then my grandmother would come pick me up and say, well, do you want to go to church? It wasn't a forced thing. And it kind of, it took me a while to actually get to where I was going to church regular because I was like, well, I don't have to go.
Well, and what I observe, and I may be wrong, this is observation. This can't be quoted or proven, but I observe that the morality of the generation behind me is not that different than the morality of my generation or the one before me. So it's not like church made us better. They're not they're good people. Like, they're good folks. Like, I'm talking about the folks that I know. Like, they're no less immoral than the people of my generation, And so what good is church? But it comes back, for me, it comes back to the cell phone, because we're isolated in this thing. And so I would wager that we need each other, and church has always offered us in our own hypocrisies and our own morality or immorality, it has given us historically a chance to gather.
Oh, yeah.
And to in some level confess and repent and maybe even be transformed over time.
And see, I think the church needs to provide an environment where you can question without being criticized. You gather together to hear other people's take on it. To me, that is the most important thing about going to church. And again, it's all about respect.
So what is questionable for a young person? What can be questioned
I mean, if you
for
look
anybody?
at one of our things that we always say is come as you are. But then a lot of places look at you and say, well, you're not coming in our doors looking like that.
So dress,
Like, imagine walking in with tattoos from head to toe.
right?
Walking in leather chaps and, a leather jacket from getting off a Harley.
Yeah.
Most churches would say, no, not happening today.
Because they think that person's a
Stereotype.
criminal.
Right. They look down on people like that.
And a lot of young people view church as being full of hypocrites.
It is.
Say one thing, do another. So why should I pay any attention
That's
to
right.
that?
And their morality doesn't, in my opinion, have not. My observation is no different than the morality of my generation, or the one that came before me, the baby boomer generation, or the one that came before them, the greatest generation, right?
Right.
So so for me, I think what somehow maybe we churchy folks maybe have got to re-examine how churches, not necessarily what churches do, but how they do it.
And see, I think one of the worst things we do that we've gotten away from is teaching. To me, church, Sunday school, youth, should be teaching these people about the Bible.
Yes.
I mean, it's only 2,000 years old,
Right.
part of it.
That's
Some of
right.
it's older than that.
Yeah.
And teaching them that this book is kind of like your manual for living.
Sure.
And you don't see a lot of that now. I mean, a lot of young people were like, well, my age was, I figured if I did everything right, I went to church, was a good little boy,
Right.
I got a lot of checks in the roll book.
Right.
And only good things would happen to me.
Yeah.
And then when bad things happen, you want to quit. Well, wait a minute. So see, I think church needs to be there to explain to you, God never said
Right.
you weren't going to have trouble.
So
In fact, it's the exact opposite.
So, in our context in America, in the Deep South, this is the reality we're feeling. But I would argue that in other contexts, say south of the border, so to speak, in Hispanic countries, in Cuba as an example, in Guatemala, in Costa Rica, the church in Venezuela, they are experiencing a lot of political strife and a lot of economic strife, and yet the church is flourishing. I mean, we hear stories. I hear stories from missionaries. I hear stories. I read articles in magazines like Good News Magazine or Christianity Today, and there are revivals in Africa, in parts of Africa. There are young people that are coming to Jesus and leading the church.
Because
So it's not happening here.
Provides a sense of calm in the eye of the hurricane.
Right.
I mean, if your country's in upheaval, church is a place where that's not. And see, we don't have that. In fact, we don't provide that.
And in this country, we've had young people after young person after young person after young person called by God to ministry. We're not in we ordained, our annual conference ordained 50 people last year. 50.
Wow.
Well, just from this church, how many we sent out for local pastor?
If you go out as a local pastor, you'll be the third.
Mm-hmm.
Within a year.
Yeah, so what's really strange to me is that the church, God seems to be really pressing upon younger people to be ministers and to serve in churches, and yet the communities have not yet, or I say yet, have not come into the church.
And a lot of it's priorities.
Well, see, some of it too is they haven't hit rock bottom. It's like J.D. Walt
That's
said at
right.
that New Room conference we were at, and Thomas Davis also said it. Most time when the church sees an awakening or a revival is when they hit rock bottom and they have nowhere else to go but up, and they're looking for somebody to pull them out of the pit.
So we're not at rock bottom. We got a ways to go.
I read once, God really reveals himself in times of trouble. And see, look at the average young person. What's the biggest thing they have to worry about? Will I get a car? Don't I have a car? Keeping mom and daddy off my back? Am I going to be able to go out Friday and Saturday night?
Right.
I mean,
So these young people are maybe questioning, or they question why church. We just, in this process, I think we're on the top of a helter skelter. We are sliding down the slide, like the song says, and we are heading towards the bottom.
yeah.
We haven't made it down the bottom yet. In the meantime, we've got to help the younger people know that the doors are open for them to ask questions.
That's right.
And see, one of the things that they surveyed was what was the one thing that young adults wanted to do, and teenagers. Their biggest thing is we want to change the world for better. And to me, that means to change the world, they have to have God. And a lot of them seek that emptiness that they have in their heart. They seek to find a place to fill it. But as Christians, and I'm saying Christians, not just the church, we have to go out and actually give them a place to where they can fill that void in their heart.
And see, that void is what makes them question, which it's like they're floundering, they're drowning.
Right. Because they're sucking air, but they don't know how to get the good air. the refreshed breath that we have.
Well, the hymn, how firm a foundation. See, that's what church is. It provides, well, and I grew up hearing, you go to church on Sunday, it starts your week off right.
Right. And see, a lot of times, the other thing too is they're also taught in school to question faith because of the fact you can't see it. We know it's there because we can feel it. But until they feel that empty void and they're overflowing to God's Spirit, they can't really feel that 100% faith in something.
That's right. If you can't feel it, you're going to question why. And the whole thing, too, you've got to understand for teenagers, what's the most common thread through it is rebellion. I'm not going to do what you tell me. I'm going to be independent. I'm doing it on my own.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So, therefore, they question. They view the church as being controlling them, trying to make them into something, and so they fight it.
Right. And so that's one thing I read a quote one time. It says, we cannot form our youth to the world. We need to change the world for the youth.
Right. And they don't, that's it. A lot of it is, I don't want to be a good, I don't want to, I don't want somebody to tell me what I should do. And, you know, I think in my generation, we didn't have,
Well, look at, like when Moses came down to the 10 Commandments.
oh yeah.
And he'd already told them how many times, you know, this is what God has told us to do. And they're still rebelled against him and they made a golden calf.
And then Moses crushed it and made him
Oh
drink
yeah.
the gold.
He got ticked off and smacked them with the, you know.
Yeah.
And that's an image that's always been burned in my head. Was I had a teacher that came straight out and said, you know, and she actually set us down and said, look, we are the people at the bottom of the mountain. We made the golden calf.
Oh yeah.
And Moses came down knowing that God, you know, he was trying to teach us, but we didn't listen. And a lot of times it's us not listening before we speak or do or actions that stop us from where these young people are allowed to come into our church and ask the questions and feel
A
comfortable.
lot of them question because they don't see God as being real.
Right.
It's this theory way out there in outer space that, or I'll deal with that later when I get older.
And the big question is, how do we actually teach them that God is real?
And I think a lot of that comes from being with people that actually think God is real.
Oh yeah.
I really do.
And see, if we show God's grace and mercy daily, that's one thing John Wesley believed.
Yeah.
That if we actually go out and show our faith and our grace and we show our Christian lifestyles to people, they tend to follow more of that pattern once they see, okay, he's doing good. He's it's kind of, I hate to say it this way, monkey see, monkey do.
Well, it's very similar. When they question Christ, what is the greatest commandment? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. In other words, if young people watch you treating people with grace, mercy, and love, they're going to tend to think, this person, there's something there that's allowing them to do that. But when they see you do the exact opposite, treat people cruelly and mean, and then they think, and you go to church on Sunday, you got to be kidding me.
Oh yeah.
Why should I give up my Sunday morning? Yeah.
Well, see, I used to, and we can't judge either. That's the big thing. We can't be judgmental. And I used to when I was,
Well, that's easy to say and hard to do.
I know, but there's a time in my life where I actually had a preacher that I saw him at the liquor store. And I was thinking, why is the preacher at the liquor store? That was the first question that popped in my head. I wasn't thinking he was in there witnessing to somebody. But he was actually witnessing to somebody in the liquor store. And me being a human, I judged him, and I asked him straight up, and he got offended because he thought that, you think bad of me. Because I went to the liquor store. Even though I was witnessing, you still... And I was like, once I found out what was going on, that's when I found out you can't judge by what you see. It's always...
And see, that goes right into being a young person. Like, you judge me because I don't wear the same clothes you do, or maybe I have a tattoo, and, piercing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a big fan. I'm not a fan of that, but, you have to... It takes a lot to accept somebody to get over your aversion or your preconceived idea.
Well, see, I look at what Jesus did. Jesus went out and he laid his hands on sick people,
Lepers.
dead people. He went out with the tax collectors and
Oh,
talked
yeah.
to them, the Pharisees. I mean, how many people that we would turn our back on did Jesus go out and talk to and spread the word of God to?
And he built a church on them.
Right.
So I think a lot of the questioning by young people is because of what they see church leaders and church people doing,
Right,
which is so opposite of what they say they're doing.
right. And see, as church leaders and Christians, we should actually try to strive for a better way of teaching them by
And I
action
think
and
we
showing.
need to be able to provide them an environment when they can say, ask the questions and try to answer them. And if you can't answer them, don't make up something. Just flat out be honest with
Say,
them.
I don't know, and I'll try to find out.
Be honesty. Most youth want an honest answer.
Oh yeah, and they can find out quick if you lying to them.
Oh, in a heartbeat. All right, Brian.
Well, I think that's all we got for today. We will see y'all next week. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week, and God bless you.